it's not actually pushing our audience to say, yes, absolutely. Storytelling does that. It connects with your audience on an emotional level. And when you are firing the emotional side of your brain, that's why people make purchase decisions.
Hey there, my lovely listeners. Can I just start this episode by saying I've done a lot of good interviews for this show. I have had so many awesome conversations with rad ladies out there doing their entrepreneur thing. But today's episode is extra special and extra awesome because today we're picking the brain of my personal business coach, Michelle Knight of Brand Mary. And I cannot even begin to tell you how much I seriously respect and look up to this woman. Believe me when I say Michelle knows her stuff when it comes to branding, marketing, and storytelling with intention to propel your business forward. This woman is a freaking genius when it comes to building a community around your brand and selling in a genuine way that doesn't feel like selling. It's so funny because I was actually looking at the webpage for one of Michelle's online programs as a reference when I was building the webpage for our new social media course, the Feel Good Social Map. And I was laughing about it because in my head, I was thinking, oh man, I really want to buy this from her right now. And I already freaking own it. Okay, you guys, that is how good this lady is, my friends. And that's why I am so excited about the conversation I'm sharing with you today because it is freaking gold, okay? And speaking of our new program, the doors are now open to enroll for March. In case you haven't heard, the Feel Good Social Map is a 4-week online program for down-to-earth entrepreneurs who would rather spend more time off your phone than on it. I'll walk you through the steps of creating a personalized social media strategy that works to build your community and boost the success of your business. Then we'll dive into the process of mapping out a monthly campaign calendar and planning plus scheduling all of your social media content in just a few hours every month. How nice does that sound? I just want to sigh deeply whenever I say it because I know how much time this will save you. You won't ever have to wonder again, what should I post today? And you won't have to spend an hour creating a post every day that will probably get lost in the noise of social media in a few hours anyway. No, with the Feel Good Social Map, you will not only be saving the time you've been wasting, but you'll also come at social media with a personalized plan of attack so that you know every post you put out there has a purpose that will bolster your business. By the end of March, you will walk away with a fully outlined social media strategy and all of your social posts for April planned, scheduled, and ready to go. You'll also have the tools to repeat this batch planning process every month for the rest of eternity if you want. Sounds pretty freaking awesome, right? If you're interested in saving more and wasting less time on social, you can find all the dirty deets at feelgoodsocial.com/social map. Just go to feelgoodsocial.com/social MAP to find out more info and sign up for this time-saving, life-changing, biz-boosting program. All right, now let's get back to the subject at hand and dive deep into an honestly amazing conversation about purposeful storytelling with my business coach, Michelle Knight. Hey friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social Podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I'm here to help you market your business in a genuine way that works without wasting your precious time. On this show, we chat about social media strategy and mindset tips with a focus on, you guessed it, feeling good. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some genuine conversation for the good of your biz. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Well, I already gave you a little introduction before this, but I would love to hear in your own words, what do you do and who do you serve and why did you start?
That's the big one. Why did I start?
Exactly.
Yeah, so my name is Michelle Knight, as you all already know, and I'm the founder of brandmary.com, and I'm a personal brand consultant and marketing strategist for female entrepreneurs. And I've been doing that. I have been running my business for 4 years now. And before that, I was working in the nonprofit world. As a communications consultant, as a manager, doing advocacy work. I used to go to Washington, D.C. and work on the Hill. So I had a really strong communication background and honestly loved my job. I loved it so much. I had no intentions of leaving, which we don't hear a lot.
Yeah.
Like in the entrepreneur space, everyone's like, oh, I hated it. But I truly, truly loved it. I loved the work that I was doing. And I got pregnant and had full intentions of going back to work. And then my son was born, and suddenly everything really shifted for me. I had a difficult postpartum experience. So it took a really long time for me to heal emotionally, mentally, and physically. And during that process, I really started to think about what would it be like if I was home all the time? Would it be like if I created this business that I think had been always playing in the back of my head? Like I used to pin, I had a Pinterest board that was like ways to make money online.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I
Oh,
had
yeah.
all these ideas. I had dabbled in blogging when I worked in PR. So it had kind of all been leading up to this moment, but it was really my son's birth that shifted everything for me. And I was sitting on the couch feeding my son, and I looked at my husband. I can't even imagine what was going through his mind at the time because
Yeah.
I looked like a completely different person. I probably hadn't said anything to him in like a couple hours. And I was like, I don't think I want to go back to work. And bless my husband, he was like, okay, well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how to make this happen. He's probably like, don't do
Okay.
anything crazy.
Yeah. All right, honey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, this is good. And he's always been my biggest support system. But I think he was also like, wow, this is coming out of nowhere. But that really kind of set in motion, like me admitting it and saying it out loud and then saying it to him, set in motion this idea that I would start my own business, leave my 9 to 5. And so I started working on my business on maternity leave. I was building my business when I went back, working my 9 to 5. And a couple months after I went back to work, I left my 9 to 5, went full in on my business, and we've scaled it to where it is today. And retired my husband from his retail job at the beginning of 2019 and sold everything and started traveling full time. So
Yeah.
it's
Oh
crazy.
man. I love your story. I've told you this before, but I'm like, you're who I want to be, I'm like, yes, this is perfect. I love the traveling portion of it. And I don't think I realized that you didn't start your business until you had your son. I knew the whole story about, you kind of struggling with the postpartum depression and everything, but I didn't realize that you hadn't even started yet.
Yeah. And so I was growing my business while working a 9 to 5 and raising this new baby at the same time. And so when I talk to moms and when I talk to even women who aren't moms yet, who want to become moms, I'm like, I get it. Like, I totally get it because I really was in the thick of it. And I think that made me stronger in the long run. And it definitely helped me tell more stories because I had so much happening in my life that I was like, here, let me share what's going on with me so that I can build trust with you and that you can also feel like a human and not feel like something's wrong with you because you're struggling with time management or something's wrong with you because you don't know where to start in your business. Like, let me share more about the thick of what I'm going through. And that's what's really built my community.
Yeah. Oh, man. I know that's what drew me to you in the first place, I think, was that so many people kind of shy away from the hard stuff or like the messy stuff, the ugly stuff, and you just lean into it and you're just transparent about it. And I just love that.
Oh, thank you. And it hasn't been easy. Like people will see me now. And again, it's 4 years in, right? So people see me now and they're like, oh, it's so crazy. How do you do that? I'm just getting started. And I'm like, it was a learning experience. It was finding, what stories did resonate with my audience and what stories I felt comfortable sharing and when I felt comfortable sharing them. I didn't talk about my postpartum experience until almost my second year in business because I was still healing. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like really knowing yourself and growing through entrepreneurship, which I think it's like the fast track in personal development. And it's really like knowing yourself and finding those pieces of your story that are relatable to your audience and constantly just paying attention to that and starting to kind of snowball. That's what I call it. It's like start with like a small story that you're comfortable sharing. And then you'll start to pick up momentum and be like, wow, I love this. And I love being relatable. And I love that my audience is getting value. And then that gets bigger and bigger and bigger until suddenly you're just talking about everything.
Yeah. Suddenly you're an open book.
Suddenly.
Oh man. Okay. I love that we just like dived right into it because this is exactly what I want to chat with you about today is kind of storytelling and how to gather your stories and choosing which stories to share and how to share them and everything. But I think that I would love to start out by asking you, why do you think telling our stories is just so important for the success of our business?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it goes back to a couple different things. Number one is that it's relatable, right? And if we
Mm-hmm.
think about those brands that we really love, those product brands, service brands, personal brands, like whatever it is, it really comes down to how they make us feel. It's not necessarily like I could go into a store and I could choose any shampoo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I will be drawn to the ones that tell a great story or that I feel a connection to. Or for me, like I value like the work that they do in a community. So it's like those different things. That's all storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been around forever. But I think it's becoming more and more important because the markets are just becoming noisy and there's a lot of people online. Online is growing, online space is growing, which is beautiful. It opens the doors for so many opportunities, but our audiences are also super bombarded with information
Yeah.
to the point that it's becoming overwhelming. And they're no longer, buying into the old marketing idea of like really quick, fast action. You know what I mean? It's about kind of the long game and building that trust and having those recurring people who come back who are absolutely obsessed with your brand. So there's that piece of it. And then there's also the like scientific piece of it that our audience is 22 times more likely to remember what we say when we incorporate storytelling.
Yeah.
So we're spending all of this time creating content. Well, don't we want to make sure that like our audience remembers it? It's not just like they're scrolling past it, giving it a thumbs up. They're actually remembering it, taking action on it, using that in their everyday life. And storytelling allows you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, it also fires a part of our brain that makes purchase decisions.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not actually just about the logistics. Like when we map out like the logistics of a program or a product that we're selling, and we're just like, oh, it's 100%, like made and it includes this many modules. And that's great. But it's not actually pushing our audience to say, yes, absolutely. Storytelling does that. It connects with your audience on an emotional level. And when you are firing the emotional side of your brain, that's why people make purchase decisions. So it's really powerful.
Yes. Yeah. It's all about just connecting with your audience on that emotional level. Like that's what they remember. That's what sticks in their heart.
Totally.
Oh, I love that. Oh, man. Okay. So what do you think makes for a great story to share with your audience for your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one is we often tell stories from our perspective. And that's where a lot of entrepreneurs are getting it wrong. They'll be like, well, I am telling a story, but my audience doesn't seem to care. And it's because you're just telling the story from your perspective. You're not actually thinking about who's receiving that story.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just telling stories to tell stories. That's what your journal and your diary is for. Like, go write your story in there. We are telling stories to build community, to, increase our profits, to advance our mission.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the stories that we create need to be closely tied to our audience. So the number one thing that I tell people is when you're getting ready to write a story, you have to ask yourself, how is this of value to my audience? And value comes in different forms. Value can be education, right? I'm teaching you 3 ways to do X, Y, and Z. Value can be motivational or inspirational. Value can be a connection, right? Like if I'm telling a story about growing my business as a mother, I could give them some tips, but I could also just say, hey, I get where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
So they feel seen, they feel heard.
Yeah.
And so that's a piece of value as well. So the value can come in different forms, but it's really important that to share that story online, you need to answer that question. before you even start writing.
First and foremost. Yeah.
First and foremost. And so I actually have a little thing that I have my clients do and community members, not even paying clients. I'll just tell everybody about it because it's so powerful. Is you just have 2 columns, and one column is the story that you're thinking of sharing. And then you kind of draw a line and you write down how it's valuable to your audience. So every time you're thinking of a story, you're automatically like, and this is valuable because just knowing that right away is going to make your story more effective.
Yeah. What is the value that I'm providing to them?
Yes, absolutely. So that's number 1. That's the most important piece. And it's often the piece that people forget, actually. The second is to play to like the pain or the pleasure, right? This is how we respond as humans. We either are trying to avoid pain or we're trying to feel pleasure. And that's why storytelling is really powerful, because we can play on those emotions, right? This all comes back to the emotional component. So also identifying those pieces is also going to elevate your story. Is this a story, that's getting my audience closer to feeling at peace or pleasure or happiness? Or is this a story that's going to really kind of bring to the surface maybe some pain that they're feeling, let them know that they're not alone, or give them action steps to move forward? And so addressing those 2 pieces is really, really powerful as well.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man. So I've been hearing this quote a lot lately where it's share the scar, not the scab.
Yeah.
And I just want to know kind of what you think about that. Do you think that when we're telling personal stories, should we always have kind of that solution of sorts, or is it okay to just share maybe some of that scab sometimes?
I think it depends. I think majority of the time, it doesn't necessarily, I would say not necessarily a full scar, but like you have some resolution. You're not in the thick of it. I actually don't recommend, and I'm super transparent and super, authentic. That's like my thing online. But there's a lot of things that I might be going through personally that I'm not ready to share with my audience. And that is okay. That does not make me a bad storyteller or a bad marketer. I need to get to a place where I'm able to guide my audience. And this is one of the things that Donald Miller talks about from StoryBrand. He's amazing. And he talks about really being the guide for your audience. You can only be the guide if you aren't in the thick of it. Otherwise, you're just honestly, you're probably just overwhelming your audience. And sometimes we can be too transparent to a point where we kind of lose that connection with our audience. And I've seen this online a lot. So I always love to just make sure that I'm feeling confident and sharing the story. And again, it could be just a piece of it. So I'll give you an example, not to be like Debbie Downer, but one of the things that I talk about a lot is grieving and grieving as an entrepreneur, because one of my stories is the loss of my brother. That happened 10 years ago. So way before I even started my business, I lost my brother to childhood cancer. And I have slowly started sharing those pieces of my story because, as people know, that's a huge healing process. It's something that'll be ongoing. So I'm not sharing everything, right? That's still healing. It's never going to stop. But there are pieces that I have really felt that have been resolved that I know will be of value to my audience that I can share. So I can share those little pieces without airing out my dirty laundry, essentially, and like putting all of that out there. So I think that there's value in knowing yourself to know, is this something that I'm comfortable sharing? Is this something that, again, will be valuable to my audience? Because I do think we sometimes are like, oh, I'm just going to share this because it's happening in my life. But that's not, we're all here to run businesses. That's not actually helping your business. Like you sharing that is not advancing anyone.
Yeah, you don't want to confuse your audience. You don't want to, I love what you said about the overwhelm, because that made me think, okay, if I'm feeling something that is like very overwhelming to me, I don't need to bring my audience into that. I don't need to put that on them.
Totally. Yes. So I think that it comes from a knowing of who you are and knowing your comfort level, and then tying it back every single time to, is this valuable to my audience? Like, is me sharing this actually going to support them and help them? Or is this me just quote unquote being transparent?
For sure. Yeah. It still needs to relate to your audience and your business. But I do love what you said, because I actually think I mentioned your postpartum depression story as an example in episode number 1 of the podcast when I was talking about sharing stories and stuff. with the postpartum depression one, I love what you say about, not everyone has gone through postpartum depression. I don't have a kid. I've never gone through that, but I could still relate to the way you told the story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Yeah, I love that. That's such a great question. So that's where it's really important to know your audience. And the work that I do with my clients, I'm like, who is this person, like at their core, right? And really understanding what they're going through in their everyday life. And so I know that even though everyone in my audience might not have experienced postpartum depression, they're going through some sort of transformation. That's why they're drawn to me. That's why my story connects. So always tying it back to your audience. So a great example is if I'm just showing up online and sharing my story of postpartum and how I went through that and how it was a difficult transition. And then I want you to know that you are not alone, right? I'm pulling it back to my audience and I'm saying, whether you're going through this or some sort of transformation that still feels hard and dirty and like sticky and gross, like I want you to know that there's light on the other side, and you showing up every day is just getting you closer to that. So again, I've like really taken my personal story that allows my audience to get a glimpse at who I am as a human, and then I've really turned it around and given it as a value piece to my audience. And so I think that's the key. Again, comes back to really knowing your people to know what stories to share, and then making sure that you're always making it about them.
Yeah, for sure. And like one of my kind of bigger takeaways whenever I heard you say it, that like has always just stuck out to me. I was like, yes, like so it was transformational for me because I was thinking, people don't relate, like we don't all experience the same thing.
Right.
But all of our emotions are universal. So like what is the emotion in the story and how can you tell a specific experience but connect with that broader emotion maybe?
Yes. Oh my gosh. You totally nailed it. And that's truly what it's about. And people ask me all the time, well, I don't have a crazy story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like anything crazy has happened. And oftentimes it's not those crazy, like earth-shaking things that actually make the biggest impact. It's those everyday things that people are experiencing. And so I always tell my audience, it's actually harder to take those like life-altering experiences and make them relatable to your audience than it is sharing these like micro everyday stories.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about micro stories because that's why I wanted you to bring on this podcast. So this is the perfect transition into that. Can you tell us, firstly, what is a micro story? And then maybe, how do we gather them up?
Totally. So micro stories are basically those everyday stories. They're usually shorter. We often think of our brand story, and that's fantastic. You should all have your brand story. I'm a big advocate, but you can't share that every single day. That can't be the only story that you're sharing every day. Your audience is going to be like, okay, I don't actually care anymore, right? This isn't bringing value to my life. So these are the small stories that you interweave to connect more deeply to your audience and to build trust with them. And again, it's always about being memorable. It's always about connecting on an emotional level. And they're really powerful. So again, we talked about this in the beginning, 22 times more likely to remember your content if story is there.
Mm-hmm.
And so micro stories can sometimes just be one or even two sentences woven into the content that you're creating just to make that deeper connection. So these micro stories are happening every single day in your life. And I tell people that the key is just being aware of them. So having that awareness of as you're going through your day to day as a business owner, working with your products, working with your clients, that you're super aware of things that could be really relatable to your audience and you're taking note of those.
For sure. Do you have any tips for kind of how to start becoming aware and then how to, remember the stories when when they happen?
I know. I feel like that's the hardest part. And you know me, I love my systems. I love, like things working constantly to improve my business. And so the thing that I have just found to be the most beneficial, and it's the easiest thing so many people aren't doing, is just create some sort of note where you can start brain dumping these stories. That's really the first thing that you need to do. It's actually my number one tip when it comes to content creation as well. Like just sit down and say, what are all the things that I could share with my audience? You need to start there. So I personally recommend something on your phone because then you always have it with you, but it could be a journal, a piece of paper, anything like that. And it's this document that you get to just quickly brain dump all of those stories that are happening to you. If you have the time, you can expand on them a little bit more. If you don't have the time, you're just like, okay, that thing that happened, I think this is valuable because,
Yeah.
and you can circle back to it. So I actually constantly have this dump.
Yeah.
I really need a new word for that. That's happening all the time in my business. And then I sit down at the end of the month and map out 30 days worth of content. And I know you're a big fan of this as well. And so mapping out this 30 days worth of content. So I look at this, story bank, and I'm able to either create content based on those stories, or if I have a lesson or something educational, then I can go back to the story bank and say, oh, this story would tie perfectly into this. So it's like an ongoing, bank that's there that I can always pull from. I mean, mine's very long.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And at this point, I have them everywhere. And so I start to do that, and then I plan it all out so that I love to plan out my content. I don't like to write the day of because I don't think that's effective. And I think sometimes we lack storytelling when we're trying to fly by the seat of our pants on social media, because we do need to be strategic with our storytelling. And yeah, so that's how I keep a kind of an ongoing list.
Yeah, I love that. And I've been talking to a few people about this lately. They're like, oh, I have these ideas, but I'm better in the moment. I'm not as good when I just am forcing myself to create something, and sitting down. And so that's why I love this idea of the micro stories and gathering them in the moment, but posting later.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, obviously you need to know yourself. And I am never one to say there's one size to do this, but I know based on research and based on my own experience and talking to entrepreneurs at every level that it's really more efficient, and you become a better content creator and a storyteller when you're giving yourself the time and the space to write your content. And so I think sometimes people get really stressed out also about the planning portion of it. It's like you're not sitting down and writing every post for 30 days. You know what I mean? You're just giving yourself a bird's eye view of what message you want to get across to your audience or what your focus is for those 30 days. And then you get to give yourself that time, like you teach all about batching and all those strategies and stuff like that. So it's also about kind of retraining your brain. I always say, if that's great, if that's working for you, fantastic. But if it's not working, which is usually 90% of the truth, it's time to learn something different.
Yeah. Or, also maybe it's working on some level, but if you're wasting so much time doing it, then that's something to consider. Like, people really don't put as much value into their time as they need to.
I know you and I talk about this all the time. Time is like top rated resource for me, like way above money. Like, I can't get my time back. And I felt that deeply on, through the grieving process, that to be true. Yeah. And I think too many entrepreneurs are really wasting their time when it comes to content creation.
Yeah.
And planning. Like, there's a lot of ways that you can save your time. And then by doing that, you get to show up for your audience in a different way. And I think that that's really, really powerful. And sometimes it can be just like a couple hours every single week, but you snowball that into a year. Oh my gosh, it's absolutely amazing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so much. And I think that both of our audiences just really appreciate our time more so. And we really just want to save it as much as possible.
Absolutely. I think for a lot, I know that's true for your audience. It's definitely true for my audience as well, is you become an entrepreneur for something bigger. And that is to experience life, to do things differently. And you can't do that if you don't have enough time.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about saving time, guys.
All about that. All about it.
Okay, I do have kind of a side question real quick. I was chatting with this woman the other day, and she was saying how she really wants to post from the heart, and she has trouble when she's not feeling it, I guess, you know what I mean? And so I was suggesting, write down those micro stories and start diving into those just in the moment and then post them later. And she was like, oh, I don't really know if that feels right, because then it doesn't feel like if I'm posting a story that I thought of when I was in this happy state of mind and then I'm kind of down this day, it doesn't feel authentic or real. And I was like, well, you did still feel that way. Those are still your words. You felt that way at one point, and it doesn't necessarily matter if you're feeling that today, presently, in the moment. How do you feel about that, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we have this idea that social media is always in real time.
Mhm.
And let's just let me just pull back the curtain here and be like, that's not
No.
true. Like the most successful entrepreneurs that I know everyone is following and watching, first off, they're not posting that. Their assistants are
Mhm.
posting that. And so you bet your butt that they either wrote it a couple weeks ago and gave it to their assistant, or their assistant wrote it because
Yeah.
they know their brand so well. And so I think we have this idea that like everything has to be in the moment. But if you're constantly in the moment, and that's where we get obsessed with social media and that's where we waste our time, then you're not in the moment for the things that matter most in your life, right? You're not present
Mhm.
with your family. You're not present if you're like, oh, I just thought of this and I need to post this right now during dinner time. We need to work on boundaries. And so it's not actually a realistic expectation. Now, what I will say is that there is a level of grace when it comes to content creation. And so, whatever strategy you use, you want to have a big picture of the month ahead, because that's going to take the overwhelm off of you to actually think of things every single day. But you also give yourself grace to move things around. That's why you're the CEO of your own business. Like
Yes.
nobody knows that plan except for you. That plan is only really for you so that you can more efficiently run your business. So if a story comes up in the moment that you're like, I really want to share this with my audience, and it feels good and it's super present, then do that. But like, let's take the pressure of having to show up every single day with something new. That's where we get exhausted. And that's where the consistency lacks. And consistency is the number one thing that you need in your business.
Yes. I've heard this question quite often where it's like people just feel overwhelmed. They set these goals and rules for themselves, and then they feel like they need to live up to them.
Totally. And I think for a lot of us, that comes from being in a corporate space or working for someone else and being on very specific deadlines. And that's a mindset shift that we have to really make our own and know that this is our business. We get to create it and run it and design it in a way that feels in alignment. And when you're running a business based on outside expectations, you're only going to be able to do that for so long. And
Mhm.
that's why we hear about burnout in the industry. And that's why we hear about, people disappearing or businesses failing, right? Like, let's all be the failure rate is not great. Like, it's very, very high
Yeah.
for online businesses. And I really think that comes down to those crazy expectations that we set on ourselves. And so you really need to, and it comes back to what we talked about in the beginning, you just always need to be paying attention. Does this feel good? This doesn't feel good to post. So I'm going to do it tomorrow. Giving yourself permission to post it tomorrow. Your audience has no idea.
They don't know.
No idea. We like in our head, we're like, oh, my audience is, and I say this with love, but we're like, oh, my audience is waiting for this blog. And it's like, I hate to break it to you, but your audience actually isn't. Your audience is living their life. They're dealing with
Yeah.
their own stuff. Like, of course, your content and everything is valuable to them, but they're not waiting to move on with their day because you didn't release your blog at 8 a.m.
Mhm.
Give yourself some grace.
Yes, yeah. And oh man, I feel like this has been coming up a lot lately too, where I see it on Instagram all the time or like in emails where people are like, sorry, I haven't been around in a while, or sorry, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, that's only drawing attention to the fact, like, no one knew that you.
No one knew.
Oh man, yeah, we're all like the stars of our own lives. We're all consumed with ourselves. Like, no, you're only bringing attention to the fact that you're missing for a week or something. You're not. It's no one else like really noticed. I can promise you, except maybe your grandma and your mom.
Right, right. And I even have like, I've never ghosted my audience, right? Like even
Mhm.
when we were like packing up everything and moving, like I couldn't really wrap my head around like being inspirational in that moment. So I would like repurpose other content, or I would show up on Insta stories and just show the process. Like there were different ways to show up, but I've gone like maybe like a week without sending an email like a couple times, and I've had my audience be like, just making sure that you're okay, because I'm
Well,
so
Michelle, yeah, your audience is like, wait, where's Michelle?
because I'm so consistent, right? And so
Yeah.
it's not that they're not able to live their life because of that. They're just, we have a tight knit community. And so they're like, I'm a friend checking in on you. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what you ultimately want. But again, me not sending that email, they weren't like, Michelle didn't send my email this week. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to keep living my life? It's okay, you guys. Like, it's okay to give yourself grace.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'm so glad that we talked about that because that's been something I think I've been struggling with, as a new entrepreneur myself, and then also just seeing other people struggle with that as
Mhm.
well. It's like we set these expectations, but who are we answering to? We're answering to ourselves, like it's okay. The
Yeah.
world will keep spinning.
It will. And I still struggle with those to this day. Like I constantly just have to, and I think that's the awareness component that we just keep talking about. Just when that happens, just become aware and then work through it and work yourself down that like, no, you don't need to stay up till 2 a.m. writing that blog post, like go through that process, and it just becomes faster and faster. And then eventually you're like, okay, this expectation is just like ridiculous. No, I'm closing my computer and walking away. It just kind of becomes second nature. It's not that it'll ever go away, especially if you're a recovering perfectionist like me, but it's just having that awareness that like you are doing this because you wanted to create a business, because you wanted to make an impact. You get to do this your way.
Yep, for sure. Okay, I just thought of a question about micro stories again.
Yeah,
I
let's do
want
it.
to ask you before I forget. But I have a lot of people following me who are like kind of artisans or jewelry makers or, craftspeople. And I think that maybe sometimes people who sell products have trouble telling stories in their business because the business to them feels more about the products, or like they have trouble putting themselves in the business. Can you give them just like any advice about what stories to tell or how to tell them?
Yes, 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 yes. So first off,
Are you enjoying this episode so far? If you answered with a big hell yes, I would love to ask you to snap a screenshot and share it to Instagram so all your biz buddies can hear it too. And don't forget to tag us at feelgoodsocial so we can spread the love right back to you. Thank you so much for listening, my friend. Let's dive back in. Can you give them just like any advice about what stories to tell or how to tell them?
yes, 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 yes. So first off, you need to stop looking at the product as your business. That's actually not your business. That's just one thing that you sell. You need to start shifting to creating a brand. And that's that loyalty that people aren't actually loyal to a product. They are loyal to the brand, loyal to the experience. And I absolutely love Mark Schaefer. He's an author that I'm obsessed with. And he has a book. He has tons of books, but he has one about marketing rebellion. And in the book, he tells this story of soap, right? And like the soap business essentially going out of business, right? Because they were constantly focused on product, product, product. Like here's the soap. And there's so much. And now we see all these artisan soap makers coming up who aren't investing in advertising, who aren't doing all of those old school marketing strategies that are just building local communities and connection, showing people how the soap is made, showing people the ingredients that go into the soap, showing people where they come from, right? The ingredients, the process, sharing their story as artisans. And suddenly it becomes this community that then tells their friends who tell their friends who tell their friends. And
Yes.
those are those artisan brands that are doing so well. It's not because they have X number of followers. It's not because they're spending money on Facebook ads. It's because they're telling great stories. So I often tell people who sell a product to think about who's buying their product. So many product companies forget to think about the person, their ideal client, because they're delivering a very specific product. You guys have a lot to worry about with shipping and payment, like things that I do not have to worry about in my business.
Yeah.
I don't ship anything. And so they sometimes forget that we're making this for a reason. We're making this for a particular person. So to do that ideal client work, think about like, why would someone buy this product over somebody else's product? Is there something in your product that's different? I often say like, I'm a big like 100% organic cotton, like eco, that's like my thing. And so I'm like, I
Yeah.
will find small brands that use that particular, cotton over something else. And then if they also tell me like where that cotton comes from, and if they also tell me like why they created this business, like their big why behind it, well, you've got me as a fan for life.
Yes. We were just talking about this last night. I went to this networking event. I was chatting with this guy who does like CBD
Yes.
stuff and all that. And he was like, the numbers aren't moving and all this stuff. And he was really upset about it. And I was like, well, are you like showing your process? You're this small artisan company. Like I see the crafts people and the artisan people doing so well on Instagram because they're sharing their stories behind the brand. And that's kind of like becoming this bigger trend in our society, to care about those small business owners and, the sustainability or like the type of material being used and everything.
Right.
They're the ones who should be telling the story more than anyone even.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so I think when you feel that disconnect as an artisan, it's because of the ideal client work. It's because you're like, well, this is the product. I talk about the product all the time, but why is that important to your audience? Again, it just goes back to being like, how is this of value? Why is this important? And again, when you can break it down and say, well, my audience cares about X, Y, and Z, well, then start showing that through storytelling. And I always tell artisans, like, the first thing that you can do is just show your process. Just show what it's like to, make that jewelry at home. Like there's this brand that I absolutely love, and she makes all her like clay jewelry at home. And I love watching her stories because she'll show new prints that she's making and when the restock is, and, a layout of all of them, and her wearing her like mask and like sanding her stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I love it. Cause I'm like, I'm seeing the process and that makes me excited. And I've told everybody about her brand. So I think that as an artisan, that's where you should start. Just start there and then do that ideal client work and expand into more of those stories.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I was chatting with this man and he was asking, how do you grow your audience on social? And I was like, I think that really what we're moving toward is treating social media as word of mouth marketing.
Mm-hmm.
How can you build your community of loyal customers and ask them to share with their friends as well? Like, I think that is the best way we can use social media these days.
Yes, I want you to like quote yourself on that and make that an image because that's so good.
Yeah.
It's true. It is true. When social media really started, when brands and businesses realized that like, wow, this is where we can advertise, they really started treating social media like TV and print and radio. But that's not why social media was created. Social media was created to be social. Mm-hmm. And so that's why people are becoming more and more aware of the advertisers and the sleazy selling strategies. And so when you can shift as a business owner, especially right now, you are going to be ahead of the curve because eventually that stuff is just not going to work the way that it used to.
Yes.
And so it's about being more social, building those connections with your audience, focusing on the brand, not just the product, and really creating that experience so that your friends share your post or screenshot it and share it in their stories. And it's like our new age of like mouth to mouth referral system is essentially Instagram.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And you know what I've been just geeking out about so hard lately is that not only is this great, like strategy wise as like people to people, but it's also that is kind of how the platform is shifting as well. Like all the social media platforms are shifting toward putting more weight on those shares and the saves and all of that stuff, the comments, the longer form comments and all. And it just makes me so happy.
It makes me happy too. And I have this conversation with my community all the time. Stop blaming the algorithm. The algorithm is actually helping you become a better storyteller.
Yes.
It's demanding more of you. Social media is demanding more of us as business owners and marketers, and we need to step up or get out. And the stepping up means creating better stories, making more connections, having conversations, and focusing less on like, this is my product and you should buy it. And more of like, this is my brand. Here's why it's important to you.
Yes. Okay. And this perfectly leads me back into another question that I thought about a little bit ago is when you were saying, show the behind the scenes, show you making your products, new patterns I'm working on, all that. And that is just the perfect example of how you should really use social media to quote unquote sell your products. And this has been coming up so much lately from my audience where it's like, you really don't want to sell on social necessarily in like the traditional way, no one's going to respond to that anymore.
Right.
Can you give us any tips for like how you think we should be selling on social?
You're always selling on social media. Like you're always building connections and trust, and that is ultimately selling. I think the old car salesman, door to door way of selling, like that doesn't work. And that's what we're all playing over and over in our heads. So we have this icky feeling about selling. So when it comes time to make the sale, we freeze up and we're like, oh, or we like
raising my hand over here.
Or we like make the post and then we're like, oh, I hated that post. That felt disgusting. Every time that you're showing up and sharing these stories, you're ultimately leading to the sale. selling, I don't even feel like I sell in my business anymore. I was having this conversation with one of my mastermind sisters, and I was like, I don't feel like I sell anymore. People message me and they say, I want to work with you. And I say, okay.
Yeah.
And then we work together because they know me, because I've built trust with them and I've given them value. And they're like, okay, I'm ready to make I'm not like, okay, like, of course we have like doors are open for this and doors shut for that. Like there's these marketing strategies, but I know when that happens, my audience is already ready. So every single thing that you're doing, every story that you share is actually helping you become a better, not just marketer, but better in the selling process as well.
Yes. Okay. I love that. I just kind of had that like epiphany moment a little bit. You shouldn't sell on social necessarily in like the traditional way,
Right.
but you are always selling if you're telling your story and connecting with your audience. Oh, I just love that. I love that. It's like a mindset shift, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, again, that's like storytelling, like sharing these micro stories, sharing these stories are not just so that like you appear as like an expert. That's actually not what they're about. They're about connecting with your audience. And when you are constantly connecting and building trust with your audience, then when you do have something to offer them, they are going to raise their hands and be like, yeah, where do I sign up?
Yeah. Yeah.
It just makes it easier. I'm all about easy.
Yeah, for sure. I know. Yeah. If you get people to want to work with you and to reach out, and the way to do that is to allow them to get to know you and like you and trust you.
Yes. There is a quote from Zig Ziglar that says, if people like you, they'll listen. And if people trust you, they'll do business with you. And so it's like, just because someone like you doesn't mean anything, right? Like it's really easy for us to like stuff on social media. It is about trust. That's where true business and recurring revenue, recurring business comes from.
Right. Do you have any like suggestions for really how to develop that trust with your audience?
I think it just comes back to storytelling. It comes back to knowing who your audience is at their core, creating valuable content and stories that add value to their life, that help them move away from pain and closer to pleasure. And if you do that every single day, you're building trust with your audience. And then as well, I'll just add this in there, being available. I think we're really obsessed with automating everything. And there are things that you should automate behind the scenes. Content creation is one of them, right? Scheduling, all of those things that you teach. But what that allows you to do is then be more present on the front end. So building relationships, being available to answer questions. And again, it's not about like allowing people to overstep boundaries. I don't do free coaching in my DMs, but if someone messages me, has a question about something, it's me. I'm available. I will have this conversation with them. And those are the brands too that I absolutely am always drawn to. And I'll keep coming back over and over again. Because if, let's say, like for all the artisans, like let's say that you have a product and something happens, right? With shipping or the product, breaks or something. If you're not available to correct that and you're not like building that relationship, it's really easy for somebody to go find someone else and worse, start building a bad rap for you online. But if you're available, because you're not trying to automate every single conversation that's happening, you're going to keep that client, right? You're going to keep that client retention.
Yes. Oh man, I'm so glad that you brought it there. Firstly, just because that's exactly completely what I believe in. That's kind of where my whole new course is coming from, is like teaching people how to save time on this one part of social media, because the more time should be spent doing the nurturing, which you really can't automate, So it's creating time to do that.
You shouldn't automate it either. Like, why? Why would we want to do
that?
No,
you shouldn't. And you can't really, and
People try, but when that stuff is automated and it makes you feel gross, and it doesn't make me want to, follow them or engage with them or anything. And so you're totally right. Like there are things like the systems that we've been talking about that can be automated to free up time to focus on community.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Michelle. I've had such a great time talking to you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. Can you tell all of my people where they can find out more about you? Because I love working with you and I know that they're going to want to go stalk you as well. So.
Okay. I'm all about the stalking.
Yeah.
So my website is brandmerry.com, BRANDMERRY.com. I have a blog, tons of free resources on there. So go ahead and check that out if you are a female entrepreneur. And then I'm hanging out on Instagram most of the time. and I'm at Michelle Knight Co. on Instagram. And then if you are an entrepreneur who's wanting to advance their brand, their business, and their marketing strategies, I do a weekly show on Mondays called Mondays with Michelle. And you can get all that information on Instagram, on my website, all of that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. My audience just needs to come hop on the Michelle train because I just love, I love everything that you're about, girl. Yeah.
I love that.
Well, thank you so much again and have a good day, girl.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness. How freaking fantastic was that conversation? I knew it was golden because as I was editing, I was getting too caught up in our conversation to listen for the heavy breaths or coughs or anything like that. So I am sorry if I missed anything, guys, but I bet you didn't even notice because all the info was just too good, right? You can find anything we mentioned in the show notes below or go to our link for the show notes, which is feelgoodsocial.com/episode/8. And once again, if you're interested in joining myself and other rad entrepreneurs as we create a social media strategy that works for your business and plan out all of our social content for April, then check out the Feel Good Social Map at feelgoodsocial.com/social map. Thanks again, friend, and we'll chat next week.